All right. This is Unit 3, Chapter 8, Lesson 1, Anglo-American Colonization. I will learn about Moses Austin's plan and Stephen F. Austin also, their plan for Anglo-American settlement in Texas. Moses was Stephen's father, and he carried out his father's plan. What difficulties did Austin face in the early stages of forming a colony? Slide to go. Here's some maps. Here's some pictures, different maps and things. Here's the colony. Lead mining in the early 1800s. A biography about Stephen F. Austin. He was considered the father of Texas. He was the first in establishing an Anglo-American colony and helping to form the Republic. He grew up in Missouri and was studying law there when his father, Moses Austin, first thought about starting a colony in Texas. Although he did not strongly support his father's plan, he agreed to help. In 1821, his father died, and Austin took over the task of establishing the colony. Mexico won independence from Spain in 1821, and Austin secured the new government's approval of the land contract. When Mexican officials later began putting restrictions on colonization, he traveled to Mexico in 1822, a journey of about 1,000 miles, and persuaded them to change the laws. Go on to the next one. Here's a picture. What they used to use for mapping. This is the National Palace in Mexico City. Here's some terms to know. Depression, a period of low economic activity and high unemployment. Diminished, to become smaller. Anglo-American, a white person living in the United States who is not Hispanic. Reluctance, unwillingness, a lack of enthusiasm. Survey, to measure the boundaries of something such as land. Impresario, the Spanish word for a land agent whose job it was to bring new settlers into an area. Militia, a group of citizens acting as a military force. Moses Austin plans a settlement. Guiding question: why did Moses Austin plan an Anglo-American settlement in Texas? Moses Austin was born in Connecticut in 1761. In 1798, he moved to present-day Missouri, which was part of Spanish Louisiana. Moses Austin worked hard to build his businesses and increase his wealth. He was successful until a depression, or a downturn in the economy. It occurred around 1812. Austin, like many others, went into debt. His fortunes diminished, but he did not give up. So the definition of depression is a downturn in the economy. Moses Austin had a plan to regain his fortunes. He knew that other Americans were hurt by the Depression and would want to buy cheap land. He also knew that the Spanish government wanted more settlers in Texas. By 1820, there were only 3 settlements there. In 1820, Austin traveled to San Antonio to meet with Governor Antonio Martinez. Austin asked to bring 300 Anglo-American families to Texas. Anglo-Americans are white, non-Hispanic people. The governor rejected Austin's plan. Then Austin's acquaintance, Baron de Bastrop, convinced Martinez to ask the Spanish government to approve Austin's plan. On his way back to Missouri, Austin became ill. He reached home, but he did not get well. Governor Martinez sent Erasmus Seguin to tell Austin that the Spanish government had approved his settlement. Austin began to prepare, but became very ill. He asked his wife to write to his son, Stephen, asking him to carry out the Texas venture, and Moses Austin died on June 10, 1821. Stephen F. Austin takes charge. How did Stephen F. Austin carry out his father's plan for a Texas colony? Stephen Fuller Austin felt a reluctance to carry out his father's plan, but he did. He went to San Antonio to discuss the colony with Governor Martinez. Then he explored Texas to find a good site for the colony. He chose the coastal plain between the Colorado and Brazos rivers. Time proved Austin's choice to be a good one. The region had rich soil, water, and a warm climate. Once the land was cleared and plowed, it produced crops that would spur the development of Texas as an agricultural center in the West. After choosing a site, Austin returned to New Orleans. He asked Governor Martinez to grant him additional land along the coast. That would make it easier to transport settlers and supplies to the future colony. Austin surveyed or measured the land to find the boundaries of his colony and to mark off plots. Once plots were surveyed, settlers could apply for their land. The journey to Texas was long and difficult. Settlers needed a spirit of adventure to consider joining the colony. If they made the decision, Austin had a plan for how to assign each land in the colony. Here was his plan. A free man received 640 acres, 320 acres for his wife, use the mouse, 80 acres for each enslaved person, and they had slavery then, 160 acres for each child. Colonists with special skills received additional land, like merchants, doctors, ferry operators, and mill operators. So the question here in your study slides is how much land would a free man, his wife, and their 3 children receive? So you can go back here to figure that out. Austin had many expenses and duties. He had to advertise for settlers, apply for land titles and records, register new grants, and travel to meet with government officials. To meet these costs, he charged 12.5 cents per acre. This was much cheaper than U.S. land. Settlers had to meet certain conditions. Governor Martinez said that the settlers must behave well. They had to be Catholics and become citizens of Spain. Austin tried to choose hardworking people for his colony who would take their duties seriously. He wanted farmers from the southern United States who would know about the climate and growing conditions of the area. People responded quickly to Austin's advertisements. Austin arranged for a ship, the Lively, to transport colonists and supplies to Texas. Its first trip was disastrous, but the Lively set out with colonists for Texas again in 1822. The ship wrecked, but the passengers were rescued by another ship and brought to the Colorado River. Colonists had begun to arrive over land, too. It was a difficult beginning. What difficulties did Austin face in the early stages of forming a colony? Mexico won independence from Spain in August 1821. In early 1822, Governor Martinez told Austin that the new Spanish government would not uphold the Spanish land agreements. Austin hurried to Mexico City to meet with the new government. He stayed in Mexico City for 1 year. His efforts paid off. By 1823, a new law was passed that granted Austin a contract for his colony. Okay, there's a question in between there in your study slides. This law increased the amount of land granted to each settler. Farmers and livestock ranchers could get 4,605 acres per family. Austin was an impresario, a land agent who brings new settlers to an area. Therefore, he received about 100,000 acres of land. The 1823 law was supposed to apply to other impresarios too. In the end, however, only Austin and his colony benefited. Later, colonies were started under different laws. In 1823, Austin returned from Mexico to find that his colony had faced difficulties. A drought caused some colonists to leave. Land still needed to be surveyed. Settlers had disagreements over land claims. As land commissioner, Baron de Bastrop helped Austin settle claims and record land titles. Austin's settlers had other worries too. Some Native Americans traded with the settlers, but others were unhappy about settlers on their land. The Karankawa and the Tonka raided the settlements and stole livestock. Austin tried to make peace, but he felt he had to use force to protect the colony. He led a militia against the Caracalla. In 1824, a Catholic priest convinced the two sides to make peace. However, fighting between the colonists and the Caracalla and other Native Americans still occurred from time to time.